It's Friday, June 13th, and it's 4:20 somewhere in the world. I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Produced and distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C., this is your NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, artists, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, stash.norml.org. and continue the education and conversation on our blog as well. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. The podcasting and blogging technology for the NORML Daily Audio Stash is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. Visit www.redaphid.com.
All right, welcome to the weekend, you beautiful Daily Audio Stash fans. It's a beautiful 75 degrees and sunny here this weekend in Portland, Oregon, so I'm looking forward to it. It's nice to see the summer finally peeking out and giving us some sun rays. We've, of course, got our final look at the Aspen Legal Seminar that happened this last weekend in Aspen, Colorado. I'm going to be bringing you another two-part segment. This one's from Douglas Hyatt, a criminal defense attorney from Seattle, Washington. He's been a guest on the Stash previously, and he's discussing the medical use issues in Washington State with quite a look at the Tim Guerin case and Jonathan Simpson case up there in Washington State, the medical marijuana users who have been kicked off the transplant list for transplant organs. So Douglas will be detailing that, plus some other issues related to Washington's controversial 60-day supply rule for medical marijuana patients. We've also got a musical break with Jet Baker, who's going to be bringing us the tune Pot Party. And then, of course, this weekend we'll have another weekly audio stash for you where we'll put all the last 10 daily audio stash tunes into one podcast for your weekend party pleasure. So sit back with a little bit of muggles and enjoy your NORML Daily Audio Stash.
Now it's time to take a look at the latest stories about marijuana from news organizations across America and around the world in our NORML Daily Audio Stash, Hemp Headlines.
Activist Dana Beal not charged with money laundering. Charleston, Illinois. No money laundering charges were filed during a court hearing Thursday for a New York man accused of trying to hide a bag with a large amount of money from Mattoon, Illinois police earlier this month. Irvin Dale Beal, 61, was charged only with obstructing justice Thursday, though his case's prosecutor said other charges could be filed later. The attorneys in the Beal's case also agreed that his bond will be reduced. Beal and another man, Jesse Balcom, age 30, of Silver Springs, Maryland, were arrested at the Steak and Shake restaurant in Mattoon on the morning of June 3 after police initially went there on a report of two women having an argument. According to Mattoon police, bystanders asked officers to question Beal because they say they saw him retrieve a bag from his van and hide it under a car. Officers found the bags contained about $150,000 in cash and then had a police dog investigate the bags, and the dog reacted as if drugs were present, though no drugs were found, according to police documents in the case. Beal denied any knowledge of the bags, and he was arrested on suspicion of money laundering and obstruction of justice. The Associated Press reported that Beal is also a member of the Youth International Party, whose members are commonly known as Yippies, a 1960s-era hippie political movement. The news service also reported that he's also been a longtime advocate in New York City for the legalization of marijuana. In court Thursday, Assistant State's Attorney Mick McAvoy wouldn't say why he didn't file money laundering charges. McAvoy would only say that the case is still being investigated. Illinois law defines money laundering as someone moving money from one location to another with the proceeds coming from drug sales, and it can result in a prison sentence of 4 to 15 years upon conviction. The charges McAvoy filed against Beal Thursday were 2 counts of obstructing justice that accuse him of hiding the bags of money and then telling police he didn't do it, both to avoid arrest. The charges can result in a prison sentence of 1 to 6 years, with the maximum sentence twice what's usual for the offense because Beal has prior marijuana possession conviction, according to McAvoy. The 2 women involved in the argument police investigated at Steak and Shake, Charlotta D. Luch, 52, of New York City, and her mother, Cathradina Luch, 85, also of New York, were traveling with Beal in Balcom. Let me get this straight. They aren't going to file money laundering charges. So the bag of cash he had is legal, right? Now he's going to be charged with lying about hiding something that isn't a crime. I've just got to wonder what kind of argument the 52-year-old woman and her elderly mother must have been in that it required the police to be called in. And why would Beal leave the restaurant to go to the van to get the bag of money and hide it? I don't see how an argument inside a restaurant would give police probable cause to search his van. Sounds like a weird case to me, and I just hope that Dana Beal escapes from these charges without any jail time. Clinic treats children for mobile phone addiction. From the Telegraph in the UK. 2 children are learning to live without their mobile phones after becoming so badly addicted to the technology they were admitted to a mental health clinic. The children, aged 12 and 13, were treated for mobile phone addiction. They were brought in after spending an average of 6 hours a day on their phones, talking, texting, or playing games. Their parents became concerned that the children, aged 12 and 13, were unable to carry out normal activities without their handsets. They were failing at school and deceiving relatives in an attempt to obtain more money for phone cards. However, it may take a year to wean them off of the drug, said Dr. Maite Utges, director of the Child and Youth Mental Health Center in Lleida, northeast Spain, where they have been treated for the past 3 months. She said, quote, "It is the first time we have used a specific treatment to cure a dependence on the mobile phone. They both showed disturbed behavior, and this exhibited itself in failure at school. They both had serious difficulties leading normal lives." End quote. Both children had had their own phones for 18 months and were not controlled by their parents. Dr. Utges continued, saying, quote, "One paid for their phone by getting money from the grandmother and other family members without explaining what they were going to do with it." End quote. At least 2 cases of phone addiction have been reported in Britain, where young people who were obsessed with their phones and became depressed when the number of incoming calls or messages dropped. Well, this was bound to happen. You know that the potency of cell phones has more than doubled since the cell phones of our youth. These aren't your father's old brick-sized cell phones. These cell phones lure in the youth with a much higher potency communications experience than what we grew up with. The only reasonable solution is to ban all cell phones. Yep. Well, now certainly there are plenty of adults who use cell phones responsibly, but then there are those who text and drive and present a danger to all of us. Won't anyone think of the children who are most vulnerable to this deadly toxic addiction? Record drug bust. 262 tons of hashish seized. From ABC News. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has announced details of the largest drug seizure ever as the result of a multi-year investigation in Afghanistan. The DEA and Afghanistan's National Interdiction Unit, along with the U.S. military and NATO forces, captured and destroyed 262 tons of hashish June 9th in a 2-year operation dubbed Albatross. The DEA executed search warrants at 5 narcotics processing centers and discovered numerous underground bunkers in the Kandahar province, which is still under the control of the Taliban. Afghanistan's National Interdiction Unit and the DEA arrested 12 subjects during the operation and seizure of the drugs, which had an estimated value of $400 million. Some officials estimate that the drugs would have filled 30 double-decker buses. Hashish is resin derived from marijuana plants. Drug production has increased sharply in Afghanistan since 2001, with estimates, for instance, that more than 90% of the world's heroin comes from the country. The DEA has been operating in Afghanistan since 2002 to train Afghan narcotic forces and gather intelligence. DEA spokesman Garrison Courtney told ABC News, quote, "People have traditionally thought of Afghanistan having a vibrant heroin crop, but we're seeing more marijuana, end quote. Because local police don't enforce laws against the growing of marijuana, it has become more of a cash crop in the region. In late 2006, Canadian forces on patrol in Afghanistan encountered dense marijuana forests with plants at least 10 feet tall that the Taliban used for cover and protection. U.S. forces, DEA, and Afghan forces destroyed the massive stash with explosives. The Taliban? Didn't we oust those guys a few years ago? Looks like that war on terror is proceeding as successfully as the war on drugs. Regardless, once again, the prohibition of cannabis creates a lucrative market for drug dealers. The Taliban wouldn't be able to make much money off of hashish if Americans and others around the world could grow their own marijuana, press their own hash, or buy it at a liquor store. But it would be a crop with enough potential that legitimate farmers could grow it and sell it on regulated international markets. Not enough profit for a terrorist, but plenty of profit for a small family farmer.
The name's Joe Monday. I carry a badge for the DEA. The story you're about to hear is true. Only the names have been changed to protect the guilty. I was on patrol working on marijuana eradication. Our helicopter spotted what appeared to be a 6-inch marijuana plant in a pot in the middle of an outdoor herb garden. A couple in their mid-50s appeared from the home next door. As the helicopter landed, I called for backup. We secured 2 Humvees, 2 quad runners, a police van, and assistance from 20 members of the local police and DEA. The male suspect began asking questions as we held him and his wife face down on the ground with automatic weapons pointed at their head. You can never be too careful when dealing with dangerous drug users. We photographed the suspects and took their IDs as our task force uprooted the deadly 6-inch contraband growing in the herb garden. The male continued to complain that he was doing nothing wrong and that they were law-abiding, non-violent citizens who always pay their taxes. Tell that to the 14-year-old kid who gets hooked on your devil weed and becomes so depressed that he jumps out a 12-story window, I told the suspect. I've seen too many lives ruined by the demon reefer to listen to such nonsense. Sometimes a belt of scotch is the only way I can calm my nerves when I think about all the kids' lives ruined by grass. Drugs kill. Until the day there are no more drugs, I'll be there, with my badge and my gun, and my semi-automatic rifle, and my body armor, and my armored personnel carriers, and my flashbang grenades, and my tear gas, and my infrared imaging, and my night vision goggles, and my sonic scopes. I'll be there to uproot every 6-inch marijuana plant in every semi-retired middle-class couple's herb garden I find. I'm Joe Monday. Drug Enforcement Administration.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 12 states today, and THCF has medical clinics in 6 of those states. Our physicians help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms as in multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help them obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, Colorado, Nevada, Hawaii, and California. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at www.hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
Douglas Hyatt is a criminal defense attorney in Seattle, Washington, who specializes in medical marijuana cases. He's been on the stash before, telling the story of how he defended Tim Guerin, a Washington medical marijuana patient who passed away after being kicked off the transplant list because he was a medical marijuana patient. This is Doug Hyatt's presentation at the Aspen Legal Seminar on the arising medical use issues in the state of Washington. We'll play the first half for you now, and the second part will take place right after the musical break.
So, please welcome Doug Hyatt.
It's nice to be here with all of you this afternoon. And this right here is exactly why I have no confidence in high-tech stuff, and I can't use it worth a damn, and it looks like people that do have confidence in it sometimes have trouble too. This is exactly why I never can.
We need a teenager.
Do it. Yeah, we need somebody that's 12 years old to help us out. I wanted to speak just briefly on some medical marijuana issues that seem to be coming up and confronting patients in the states where it's legal and the states where it's not, for that matter. And I guess there are a couple things I think Alan alluded to earlier. I wanted to touch on the situation. There's delivery. There are various states now looking at, because there are medical marijuana laws, looking at various aspects of legal delivery of medical marijuana to medical marijuana patients. Right now, the way I see it, there is no legal delivery to medical marijuana patients because of the overlay of the federal law. So any system that delivers is against the federal law and is prosecutable under the federal law. I share Alan's pessimism that states like New Mexico, which have been through their legislators, have charged departments of health in New Mexico and in Washington with trying to come up with limits for use and with delivery systems, to be run by the state, theoretically, to effectuate their laws. The reason that Alan is pessimistic, the reason that I'm pessimistic, is because states' attorney generals have been advising departments of health and have been working with state governments to tell them not to do this because, as Alan alluded to earlier, it's violative of federal law. So what you have here is basically a constitutional crisis that we haven't seen the likes of since basically the Civil War and maybe the Civil Rights Movement, because there's a very, very real and where the rubber meets the road split in terms of federal and state law here. And there are people that are getting ground under that split every day. In California, I've lost count. I believe there are over 100 people currently awaiting trial in federal court on medical marijuana charges in California where they have no defense and they have no way out. So that's, I think, the reason why Alan's pessimistic about the states doing anything about it. I am similarly pessimistic. I've got an attorney general in my state that won't even talk to us, and who is not going to, and is going to advise the Department of Health not to look at legal delivery systems, not to explore ideas surrounding legal delivery systems, because they don't want to get involved in any kind of serious defense of the state law at the federal level. So in that sense, we're kind of stuck. And in terms of legal delivery systems, there aren't any, in my view, right now that comply, and there won't be until there's some federal solution, some legislative solution. Just simple as that. Alan also alluded to something that unfortunately I've been involved in here recently with anybody that represents medical marijuana patients knows you're representing people that are viewed as second-class citizens at best. And one of the situations I find incredibly troubling right now is this transplant issue. I had a client named Timothy Guerin, who was a Seattle musician and who was a medical marijuana patient. He was a Hep C patient. And he was using medical marijuana under his doctor's care to treat his hepatitis C. When he went to, when he got busted for growing his own medical marijuana, he was already beginning to get into the transplant programs at 2 different places. When he got busted, I started to assist him in this process, which became absurd and Kafkaesque in the extreme. Tim Guerin basically, and this may be the only time I think this is true, but I think marijuana finally did kill somebody, because Tim Guerin was refused a liver. He was refused to even be put on the transplant list because he was a medical marijuana patient. I had an experience here that was unique, I think. I haven't heard any other lawyers have this experience. But I dealt directly with the doctors. I was like in the hospital room with the doctor when they came in and told us the first time that they'd consider putting him on the transplant list if he went to 60 days of inpatient drug treatment. They hadn't even done an assessment on him. They hadn't even determined that he had a drug problem. He, in fact, did not have a drug problem. But because marijuana was involved, got to have drug treatment. Didn't even have him assessed or anything. So the committee makes their decision. I'm in the room with them when they tell them, no, you got to go through drug treatment. I told the doctor, I said, this is ridiculous. This man's going to die within 2 weeks. You know, you wanted to go through 60 days of drug treatment. This is insane. You know, I'm going to do everything I can. That's when I started calling every reporter I knew and begging them to pick up the story, and I started calling doctors I knew, and can we do something about this? And you know what? Ran out of time. Ran out of time. I got it reconsidered, got the transplant committee at the University of Washington to reconsider, you know, but they came back and said no again. Again, I was in the room and they said no again. They said, well, we just don't believe that we can give you a good outcome, Mr. Barron. It's like, Tim looks at him and goes, well, I'm going to die. I'm like, this is not a fucking good outcome. But it was the outcome. I was there a week later when he died at the wonderful Bailey Boucher house in Seattle. He's dead. He died because it wouldn't put him on the transplant list. Pure and simple. He was the #1 candidate for a liver. He was that sick. He would have been #1 with a bullet. But they wouldn't even put him on the fucking list because of medical marijuana. Because of concerns about aspergillus and things that they just pulled out of the air. But what it really was it was a moral, you know, just a star chamber is what it really is. It's just, if you are, you know, counterculture, or you're medical, you're using non-standard medical treatments, or you've got a history of drug abuse, or you've got a history of alcohol abuse, they don't want you in their transplant programs. There's a shortage of organs, and they are playing God with who gets one. Now, I've got another guy who's not as sick, and I had started to help him first. His name is Jonathan Simchen. You may have read about him. The LA Times did a little thing about him. And I'm going to be going to bat for Jonathan. If anybody has any bright ideas about how to sue, help me out on this one. I'm open to ideas. But I am going to sue on John Simchen's behalf, and we are going to get that policy changed. And John Simchen, who needs a kidney, is fucking going to get a kidney if I have to kill somebody at the University of Washington to get one.
It's not an option just to stop using for a while?
Well, you know, Simchen, what they did with Simchen was really ridiculous, because he was accepted into the transplant program, and he'd been in it for almost a year, and he's working towards getting, he's working his way up the list, he's working towards getting his transplant, and he was getting sick, he was having problems dealing with his kidney disease, so he went to a doctor and he said, I'll try some medical marijuana. Wow, it really worked for him, and he started really responding to dialysis, and a lot of other good things started happening for him, started getting healthier. He thought this was a good thing, so he decided to share that with the folks at Virginia Mason Medical Center in Seattle. And they promptly kicked him off the transplant list. They said, you're using medical marijuana, oh my God, it's a street drug, we're not having anything to do with that, we're out of here, you're out of our program, we don't want to talk to you again, blah, blah, blah. That's when I got involved with Jonathan. This predated Timothy. And I said to them, wait a minute, he's an approved patient with a qualifying condition under state law, pursuant to his doctor's recommendation. You can't do this to him. They said, yes, we can. We're private. We don't care. Go fuck yourself. Go to the University of Washington, where they'll be more sympathetic to your liberal ideas. That's what they told me when I called up to try and help Jonathan. I put Jonathan on the back burner for Tim because Tim was going to die real fast, and he did. Jonathan is healthier, and he's doing okay on dialysis 3 times a week, and we're going to try and get him in. When we went to the University of Washington, they said again, flat out, no, medical marijuana, you're not coming here. It's a street drug, it's a drug of abuse, you have a problem, we're not dealing with it.
It's not an option for him to stop using for... I represent a guy in Oregon who got visited, and he had, in Oregon we've got a firm limitation on the number of plants, and there is no affirmative defense.
Which sucks.
If you're over, and he had a couple of plants that were a little too tall, and there was a delay in the prosecution a couple of years. He's a kidney patient who he stopped using. They put him on this other medication. His health has clearly declined. I mean, he's not doing well.
Right.
But he's on the fucking transplant.
Let's make you sicker.
But he's on the fucking transplant list, and the prosecutor dismissed his case in part because there was this series of clean UAs for a period of time. I'm just asking. Isn't that a strategy? Not in the guy's case who died, but the guy's case who's alive.
The guy who died had quit. He had quit. I mean, I failed to mention that little punchline for you, but the guy who died had quit using.
And they still wanted to do.
And they wanted him to be 6 months at Harborview. When I went there to try and get Tim Liver at Harborview before he went to the University of Washington, they told me he has to be 6 months. Dr. Schuhart, there, very compassionate lady, told me, I'm sorry, I won't even put his paperwork in until he's 6 months free of marijuana. He's got to be 6 months clean. I said, okay, we did a little fudging around. We got him. April 1st was going to be the deadline. But I'm watching the guy die, right? I'm watching the guy become toxic. I'm begging them to do something, and they're not going to do it. And quitting's not an option for Simchen now because they won't take him back in the program anyway. And they wanted him to go through drug treatment too. Medical marijuana is real. It works for people. It saves people's lives, period. When you're using it under a doctor's recommendation pursuant to state law like you are in my state, the people wanted that to happen. I don't think anybody that voted for a medical marijuana law in Washington state foresaw this kind of bullshit was going to happen to people because of it. And what they're doing is flat wrong, period, flat wrong. And so this is a nationwide problem. It's, it could hit anybody, anywhere, any state. You don't have to be a legal medical marijuana patient. You could be a medical marijuana patient in a state where there's not a law and still have a medical necessity defense or something to get you out of the criminal charge. But this is going to cause you a problem because you got a dirty UA. They're going to do it. They're going to come right back to you with it.
Doug, is there any state action at all in the transplant program?
Yes, and that's why I'm going after the University of Washington, because they're the public hospital, they got the public money, they have the duty to treat everybody, and they're the ones I'm going after.
How about the private? Is there any link?
No way I could get to Virginia Mason under my legal research doesn't show me any way I can get to Virginia Mason.
What about going after the doctor's license?
You're talking about some pretty prominent doctors with a lot of backing, and I'm just me, and I'm doing the best I can, and I'm trying to get other doctors that are sympathetic and stuff to help me.
Just say no.
No matter what you call it, it's a huge part of popular culture.
Where'd you learn that, Cheech? Drug school.
You don't need weed school. You just need a copy of the new book, Pot Culture, the A to Z Guide to Stoner Language and Life.
Hey, this is great, man.
Even if you never smoked marijuana.
I never used marijuana. Sorry.
Don't think you smoked marijuana.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two and didn't inhale.
Or you used to smoke marijuana.
I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
Pot Culture by former High Times editor Steve Bloom and Shirley Halperin will answer every question you ever had about marijuana culture.
Has that marijuana made it back up here yet?
Check out Pot Culture, the A to Z Guide to Stoner Language and Life at Amazon.com or visit potculturebook.com today.
Too bad, man. I just stopped smoking yesterday.
Here at the NORML Daily Audio Stash, we work hard to change our nation's marijuana laws through education and discussion. But we also take the time to relax and unwind with an eclectic mix of pod-safe music from many independent artists. We look for music that speaks to the growing truth about cannabis, or music that speaks to broader themes of freedom, liberty, social justice, equality, and protest. To find out more about the artists and download the music you hear on this podcast, just log on to stash.normal.org. And if you'd like to get your music heard by the online cannabis community, just send us an email at stash@normal.org.
We made it to Friday, Stashers. Time for a celebration. A special treat on the stash today, the astonishing Jet Baker brings us a smoker-approved tune called Pot Party from one of his albums of the same name. You're officially invited to this pot party, Stashers. This Texan can often be found in Chicago, California, or at a NORML event near you. He has performed at the Cannabis Cup and all over the USA. Jet is the king of the Amsterdam coffee scene and the most prolific weed musician in the world. He has almost 100 cannabis-inspired songs on iTunes. You can enter the strange and wonderful world of Jet Baker by visiting his website, jetrap.com, or get acquainted with his own brand of twisted comedy on his MySpace page. We've got links to that up at the Stash blog at stash.normal.org. By the way, Jet Baker is currently putting together his Stoner Love Songs World Tour, and you can apply for one of the many positions on his MySpace page. He's even putting a call out for joint rollers. I want to see that resume. If you have a talent you could lend, I am talking to you right now. Life is too short. Jump on board and have the time of your life. Again, you can check out that MySpace page by visiting the blog at stash.normal.org, where you can also find an MP3 download of this song. It's Jet Baker with Pot Party.
Jet Baker, you've got mail.
Pot Party.
Tell everybody.
Cool. Party time, I got the invite. With the little rhyme, bring a flashlight. Don't let the dog bite, wear your pants tight. Pot Party. Pot Party, bring your buddies. It's gnarly. Pot Party. Everybody in the joint feeling good now. Take a puff if you want, cause you could now. Pot Party with all the hotties, all the shorties. It's gnarly. Gonna take a little sucky on the hookah. Cross your fingers, you get lucky with the hookup. Get on the cell phone and tell everyone you know. Let the word flow. Don't be home alone. The whole town is gonna be there. Break dancing like you don't care. Feel good groove, and you're gonna be high. I'll make your body move, and then you're gonna be high. I got the invite, out of town, on the farm. No car alarms, no firearms. Party in the barn. Not the barn for the hay, go the other way. Follow the DJ, let your hips sway. Hit the buffet, and hit the bong long. Yo, remember my song? Pot Party, bring your buddies. It's gnarly. Pot Party. Everybody in the joint feeling good now. Take a puff if you want, cause you could now. Pot Party with all the hotties, all the shorties. It's gnarly. Gonna take a little sucky on the hookah. Cross your fingers, you get lucky with the hookah.
Yeah, man, I hope you can totally hook me up.
Of course I'm gonna go to the pot party.
So you really charge that too? I love that. Are you serious?
Yeah, let's get hooked up.
What about it?
Yeah.
Feel good groove, and you're gonna be high. I'll make your body move, and then you're gonna be high. Feel good groove, and you're gonna be high. I'll make your body move.
Party in the barn?
I smoke lots of weed, man. I plant that big old seed, man. I smoke every strain there is in town. From the super sticky green to the headache mix brown. I smoked every strain there is around.
I know that I like it. I know that lots of people like it. So let's see what happens if you overdo it.
Do we have any pot smokers here today? Any at all?
My name is Doug Benson, and I'm about to get super high.
The term medical marijuana, you've basically, you drank the Kool-Aid. Because there is no such thing as medical marijuana.
I'm going to smoke pot every day for 30 days.
And try to remember to film it.
And my movie's going to be called Super High Me.
Or Business as Usual. I haven't decided yet on the title.
I'm going to be hospitalized, I think.
Some people call it dope. Some think it smells like burning rope. I tell you, it relieves my mind.
And now the second part of our presentation with Douglas Hyatt on arising medical use issues in Washington State.
Doug, I had a friend that was got hepatitis in Vietnam as a medic, and they denied him a liver and let him die in the VA hospital because he tested positive for pot.
Yeah, I've had that problem all the time. The first guy I ever tried to help on this was an Oregon guy who was a heart transplant patient, David Myers, and he died before I could even get the fundamentals, just starting research done on this.
Is there a recourse against the federal government for denying equal protection? Or?
No, I don't see it. I mean, because the way they've outlined, not having a constitutional right to good medicine or something. I mean, some law professors have suggested a medical self-defense, that kind of thing, but. None of that's flying right now, and it's not, you don't have time to start talking exalted legal theories when you got a guy you're trying to shame him into doing something.
Using what?
Charging him under the at-risk adult use act.
Well, I might take a look at that later, something we could talk later, but that's not something that springs readily to my mind as a trial lawyer.
Can they use Marinol?
Pardon?
Can they use Marinol and be admitted?
That's another question because, it appears that under some of the protocols you can, Some others, there's not a uniformity. There's no uniform answer to that question. The best answer is, yeah, you're better off with Marinol. There are people that are on whopping amounts of opioids and stuff like that they don't have any problem with.
Well, once they're on Marinol, they can't tell if they're additional cannabinoids there, can they?
Well, they can if you run a really expensive test, and you can. There are other ways. Plus, there's a certain element here where, my clients, my guys, they don't like to lie. They got this thing about being honest and telling the fucking truth. It's annoying as hell. But,
Just otherwise, the cameras, the record.
No problem, Matthew. I understand the suggestion.
Doug, Washington has a business establishment civil rights law. Basically, you have equal access to business establishment, based on disability, race, stuff like that, right? There's got to be one. Almost every state's got one.
You're sounding like you're going somewhere. Jump on board and help me out.
Does Washington, where's Jeff? Washington has because most states have it, right? Yeah. So then you have to have equal access without any discrimination. Essentially,
it might be a way to go there. And I've looked at the Disabilities Act. I'm open to any ideas. I'm trying to run them down, and I'm also a practicing lawyer that has got way too many cases right now. And I'm there are other issues I was going to skip down to. I know the transplant issues are hot one. I was going to skip down to the Department of Health issues in our own state that just happened real briefly, because that's a hot topic too. When your legislature gets charged with determining in Washington State, we have a limitation on how much marijuana you can have. It's very ill defined. It's called a 60-day supply. It was in the initiative. I didn't have anything to do with it. But you're not supposed to have any more marijuana than you can reasonably use for 60 days. So there have been all these arguments, and they've tried, they've used this as a way to screw up the law for years. The legislature last year passed a bill tasking the Department of Health, tell us what a 60-day supply is. So in your materials, there are 2 papers that are super important, in my opinion. They are papers by Greg Carter, Sunil Agarwal, Maraka Krishnatoka, Don Abrams, and others. These are cutting-edge papers that you can use with prosecutors, and you can say, look, this is what medical marijuana patients need. When you run into those cases, anybody that defends medical marijuana patients, that they use staggering amounts of marijuana compared to recreational users. You're not talking ounces, you're talking pounds.
By the way, Chris, you publish a book on this, specifically on dosage, don't you?
Yeah, and Chris is part of this. Chris is cited by our Department of Health. The interesting thing, is that his work and Carter's and these dosing papers, complement, I think, Chris's work really well, and the two that you have provided in your materials. They are cutting edge. They show basically a 60-day supply. In Washington, they urge basically a little over 4 pounds, 71 ounces. Nate Miller sitting back there of Marijuana Policy Project. They helped us kind of popularize the 71.99. There was a recommendation for 99 plants, obviously, to keep people out of the 5-year mandatory minimum. But 71 ounces was supposed to be the presumptive 60-day supply. That means if you had less than 71 ounces when they come, they are supposed to not prosecute you and leave you alone if you're a medical patient. Those are the figures we are trying to get adopted that are based on science. We had public hearings, all that kind of stuff. There was a leak. Some of the proposals got out. The governor flipped out. Law enforcement got back involved. They wanted to call secret meetings to lower this and cut all kinds of deals behind back and everything. And that's where we've been at the last 2 weeks. If you look at the Seattle Times, you can see front page articles about, the governor lying and this happening and backdoor meetings and all this crap. That's what happens. And of course, nothing new to anybody here in Colorado. Brian Vicente and Warren and all these guys know all about it. But I'm stuck in it right now trying to get reasonable limits for patients.
They haven't reached a final number yet?
Well, they put a preliminary number out of 35 ounces, which is what flipped out law enforcement and the governor, but there was an error. They had used a pharmacy student's paper. And if you correct the pharmacy student's paper, you get right back up to where we are with the 71 ounces and in Carter and Agarwal's paper.
Is there likely to be a plant limit also?
I don't know what they're going to do. Law enforcement, of course, wanted 3 ounces and 6 plants, which, wouldn't keep some of the medical patients that I represent wouldn't keep them alive for a day. But that's the kind of numbers they're looking at. There's this tremendous amount of ignorance out there about marijuana as medicine, and every time you're in a situation like this, you're fighting it. So, as well as the effects of the drug war. Are you pretty much okay? What time is it? Okay. Well, I'm going to basically shut up and sit down here and let Warren get his presentation in, and we can talk with Billy, and then maybe if there are questions, if anybody wants to talk to me about medical marijuana or ideas about the transplant issues or something, I'm going to be at the party tonight. I'm going to be around this weekend. And I'm always interested in talking about this, and I can talk for hours, bore the hell out of anyone on this topic. I do want to bring up one thing too. There's been a lot of talk of Jeff Steinborn, who I love and respect, and he's been a flatmate of mine for many years. Jeff is always harping on these, saying medical marijuana is a box canyon. It's not going anywhere. It's no good for reform. It's just it's screwing up the whole decriminalization movement. Why are you wasting time on this, you asshole? But he's the one providing me the space to do it and sending me the cases and asking me to help this poor little old lady and da-da-da-da-da-da. So I'm not sure he really puts his money where his mouth is on that one. But I would like to argue it the other way. I've seen polling data, and I would urge you all to publicize your cases and go to trial all the time, because it's a PR war, and a lot of the times when you've got medical marijuana clients, you've got the high ground and you can use it. Polling data out there, and this is my argument with Jeff, polling data out there now shows in Washington State, we've got like 87% support for medical marijuana. If you ask people in Washington State, will you legalize marijuana for adults in order to get it to patients, they say yes. Because what they're getting fed up with is the fact that they voted and they wanted this straightened out. They wanted patients and doctors to have the relationship and for them to have the marijuana if they needed it. And they thought it was going to be easy and simple, and they passed it, and it's been nothing but trouble. Every public official that has a duty constitutionally or consistent with democratic principles has gone the other way. They've done everything they can to not effectuate the law rather than effectuate the law. The voters are tired of that. If they see your medical marijuana little old lady not getting her medicine or getting prosecuted or getting her house taken away, and Jeff had, we had a classic case, Katie, talk about the little old lady, then they see that, they get angry. That's how, in my opinion, we get marijuana legal for everybody. We say, look, we can't keep, just killing these patients this way. We have to get it to them. We make that argument, I think people would legalize. That's my argument to Jeff there. He'll get his licks in here at some point, I'm sure. But that's my feeling on that politically. And I think it's important. There's a guy here I met who did a case in Texas. That guy right there did a case in Texas, medical necessity case, not even just the same thing I did before we had a law. Ran medical necessity in somewhere in Texas, Jesus, Texas, I don't even go into Texas. I won't even fly over the fucking state. I don't want him to get the jurisdiction on me. And so I won't even go to Texas. This guy, man, he goes to trial on medical necessity in the middle of bumblefuck, and the jury comes back in 11 minutes and acquits his client. That's what I'm talking about, 11 minutes. They do not want to go to trial on medical marijuana. They don't want you to get to the jury. Everything they've done to me in Washington State is to keep me from getting to the jury because they know what he did is going to happen again and again and again and again. So that's what we got to do as defense attorneys is keep pushing and try those cases. And if you don't have medical marijuana, then get medical necessity or do what Warren did. Get choice of evils. Come up with something, goddammit. Medical self-defense doesn't matter. These people are sick and they need our help. Thanks.
Thank you for downloading the NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. We are produced by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. Our executive producer is Alan St. Pierre. Our deputy director is Paul Armentano. Our webmaster is Brian Judy. And web production is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. As always, you can catch up on the latest information about marijuana at www.norml.org. And you can interact and download from our Audio Stash blog at stash.norml.org. For everyone here at NORML, I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, hoping all your harvests are bountiful and your encounters with law enforcement are non-existent. We leave you today with another cannabis quote. This one from Mahatma Gandhi, the civil rights leader in India. Quote, "First they ignore you, then they mock you, then they punish you, then you win." End quote. It's true of all civil rights movements, and we're getting into that stage where we're about to win. Public opinion is behind us and growing steadily as the younger generation takes power. So keep with the fight, good stashers. We're going to end adult marijuana prohibition in our lifetimes. Have yourself a great weekend. Enjoy the weekend music stash coming up with the last 10 songs from our daily audio stash. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.